Hey everyone, thanks for tuning in to this episode of 20 Somethings. I'm Tico, and I'm just a 20 something who gets his political news the same place I get my pop culture updates. Twitter. Oh, sorry, X, which is another thing I will not be calling today. We are leaving our exes in our past lives, actually. So, with that being said, stream Eternal Sunshine Deluxe, Brighter Days Ahead by Ariana Grande. Thank you next. Ciao. Anyway, so today we're getting into it. That's right. We're going to be talking about the P word, not party and play. Although, depending on the politician, it's not that far off. We're actually going to be talking about politics. A lot of us didn't ask for this broken system within which we find ourselves, but here we are, trying to make sense of it before we completely lose our minds. Before I dive in, though, here's a quick disclaimer. I am not a political scientist. I'm just a government hooker with big feelings and access to Instagram infographics. So let's just start with a fact. Everything is political. A lot of people say, I don't do politics. Baby, politics is doing you. You ever pay tax? Politics. You ever gone to school? Politics. You ever wondered why your Wi-Fi is slow but still expensive? Politics. You want to stream Beyonce in peace? You want to shake ass to music made by a Black American woman who lives at the intersection of race and gender? That's political, honey. You want to get paid fairly? Political. Even have the ability to leave a bad job or buy an overpriced iced coffee without spiraling into debt? You guessed it. Political. From the price of bread to the roads with 47 potholes and no sidewalks. Everything is political. Whether you engage with it or not, it's engaging with you. Politics isn't just men in suits yelling in parliament or Congress. It's power. It's who gets what, when, and how. Which honestly sounds like dating, but way messier. And don't even get me started on really big issues like climate change. That's not just an environmental thing. That's a political war zone. People are literally debating whether the earth is allowed to die, even though you can literally feel yourself frying when you step outside the house. It's crazy. And that's why when I hear the word politics, my first immediate gut reaction, literally the first thing that comes to mind is exhaustion. Like, I already have to worry about my skin breaking out if I decide to treat myself and get like a soda or something. Or if my crush watching my Instagram story and, here comes politics, like to stress me the fuck out. Like, leave me alone. Like, for me, it's like politics feels like this never-ending group project where no one agrees on anything. Like, the deadline keeps changing and somehow it's all still due yesterday. And nobody's reading the fucking group chat. Like, come on, guys. And honestly, it's why so many 20 somethings feel checked out. We're constantly doom scrolling. Every other headline is about a new crisis, a new scandal, or a new bill that's threatening someone else's rights, our rights. And it's exhausting. Like, I care, but also I need to keep my sanity because political burnout is real, especially when it feels like nothing changes no matter who's in charge. You vote, you post, you march, and then it's like, cool, now here's another war. And also rent is $200,000 a month. Like the system quite literally feels actively hostile towards us. And we're drowning in student loans, rent is wild, we can barely afford insurance, and we're also supposed to care about like zoning policies. It's like, guys, we're literally in survival mode. Give us a fucking break. And of course, that will inevitably shape how we engage with politics. And it's why a lot of us are disengaged with politics. Like, yes, it's important to stay politically informed and kept abreast and aware of what's going on politically. But for a lot of us, avoiding political discussion and discourse is a way to exercise self-care and maintain our sanity. Because, like, a lot is happening constantly. So it's like, how do you keep yourself from going insane when everything everywhere all at once feels kind of like you're in a burning inferno? Like the world is on fire like all the time. And it's like we didn't start the fire. You know what I mean? But we kind of have to do what like Miley said in her most recent song. Let's pretend like it's not the end of the world. And I don't know, it's like we constantly have to find a way in the midst of all the chaos to like find hope, to have hope, because it's like we have no other choice but it's either like hope or despair. Like there's no in between. And I know for me, like I try my best to have hope and believe that despite everything, there's still a chance for, the wrongs to become right. Because if I don't, then I'll go insane, Like, call me naive, but I just have to remain optimistic. Like, I feel like a part of me is like purposely like refusing to comply with like, this obvious plan to have us like distracted and overwhelmed constantly. But for the most part, I know if I don't remain hopeful and believe in greater things to come, then it's only going to be detrimental for me, not just to my mental health, but my physical health as well. Because if I'm stressed out all the time, like the implications that can have, like on my blood pressure or my cortisol levels, it's not healthy. It's not good. Like the last thing I want is a heart attack or a stroke. So it's in my best interest to focus on the positive and not dwell on the negative. And for me, it's like in a system that feels hostile, how do I remain hopeful? How do we remain hopeful? Like, is it the promise of things maybe hopefully potentially getting better? Or is it like the idea of our youth culture, young people actively, standing on the front lines and championing their rights and protesting? Because I think for me, it's a little bit of both because I see that there are other people that feel the same way I do, and it makes me feel less alone to see them fight for their rights. And, I see other people my age and even younger making a difference, and it makes me want to do better. There's other people that have this sense of hope and trust and faith that there are brighter days ahead and that there's a way to overcome all of this. And it's beautiful to witness. It makes me feel like, okay, I need to be a part of something. I need to make a change. I need to make a difference too. Because to be honest, I wasn't always politically informed growing up. Like, don't get me wrong, I enjoyed my social studies and history classes throughout like primary and high school. And sociology was actually my favorite subject in sixth form. But I think I was like pretty apolitical for most of my early life. Of course, when I discovered Lady Gaga in 2009, she did introduce me to a lot of political stuff by proxy. Like, for example, her advocacy around don't ask, don't tell, or her outspoken support for LGBTQ plus rights, her Born This Way Foundation promoting mental health and anti-bullying, and her performance at like the Super Bowl like where she subtly made political statements about unity and justice. Like she really helped me have political awareness, even at a time like when I wasn't really invested in politics. Like, I was a deputy head boy in primary school and a prefect and the assistant public relations officer for the students council in high school. But I don't really have any like strong memories of me being politically engaged when I was younger. Like I remember, for example, when Obama first ran for president in 2008, I was actually kind of rooting for Hillary Clinton to win, not because I understood the policies or the stakes or anything like that, but just because she was a woman. Like I didn't really grasp how monumental it was for a black man to be elected president of the United States. Like, don't get me wrong, it would have been historic to have a woman in office too. And unfortunately, like Kamala didn't win the most recent election. But at the time, like when Hillary was like, campaigning against Obama, I think I was more feminist than I was pro-black, if that makes sense. Like I didn't fully understand the intersection of race and power yet. Like, it sounds silly to admit this, but I don't even think I had much awareness of my own blackness at that time and what that even meant. So for me at that time, I, obviously saw that a lot of people wanted Obama to win because he was going to be the first black president to win. But I didn't understand why that was so important. I didn't understand the significance or the implications at that time because I'm not thinking too much about it, especially since I'm like, what, 12 in 2008? But if I'm being honest, I also wasn't really paying attention to his like policies or what he was running or campaigning for. I didn't even find out until after he won that, he was really supportive of like gay rights and all that stuff in the beginning. And it's not until he was in office, I think, was it his first or second term? I don't remember, but he did eventually like changed his mind, which is great. People are allowed to change their minds as circumstances change, but I don't know. I don't know why I thought Hillary would have been the better option when she also didn't support gay rights around that time either. And, I'm just kind of glad that I was oblivious to things beyond the surface level around that time because I don't think I would have been able to handle learning about US politics and, the US's constant meddling and participation and interference, both overtly and covertly, in like various dictatorships across the world and, their perpetuation of various war crimes via its military industrial complex. So ignorance was bliss, even though I was like literally a child. I'm just glad that I was kind of like shielded from like the knowledge of all that stuff. But yeah, like social media started to shape my worldview a little bit around, that time, specifically through things like Tumblr back then, which is comparative to how Reddit is for me now. And looking back, I'm like grateful to have had access to those kinds of platforms in like 2010, 2011, because it really gave me, like, it really taught me how to look for, that sense of unbiased viewpoints where you're not always listening to the powers that be in a sense, because, they say like whoever wins the war gets to tell the story. And I learned how you have to constantly question whose stories and perspectives are being omitted from the overarching narrative. So I fortunately learned how to distinctively, tell the difference between what's propaganda and what's actually like real news. And, even though Tumblr actually did help to inform a lot of my political views that I still carry to this day, of course, they've grown and evolved throughout time, over time. But for the most part, I like to think that like it laid the foundation. But it's kind of ironic because a lot of people like they kind of like give people on Tumblr a bad rap, like they did during this time. Like I remember when people used to call, a specific type of person a social justice warrior, like anyone who had that like liberal perspective and was always kind of like advocating for certain things. Like people found them annoying, but I learned a lot from them. You know what I mean? And it's interesting because I think the first time I really felt the weight of like politics or like racial injustice, for example, was in like 2012 when Trayvon Martin was murdered. That was jarring for me. Like here we have Obama who's in office. He's literally the president at the time, and yet this unarmed black teen was killed for existing. Like that opened my eyes to the fact that even with a black man in the highest office in the world, like anti-blackness was still everywhere and it didn't just magically go away. And it's interesting because after that initial like shock and heartbreak, like I remember like kind of retreating back into pop culture and entertainment. Like I don't know if it was just like a way to numb myself, I don't know, but it kind of felt easier to process, you know? But then the very next summer in 2013, I was in the US for like vacation when I heard about Dwayne Jones in the news. Like he was this young Jamaican boy who was murdered in Montego Bay for being gay and feminine. And I just remember thinking, I hate Jamaica. I can't wait to leave fuck this place. And at that point, I was like actively dreaming about emigrating to the States without really considering that America was just as violent, if not more so. Because, like, in Jamaica, I knew I'd have to deal with like homophobia, sure. But in the US, I didn't consider that I'd been navigating homophobia and I'd also been navigating racism, which wasn't something I had to really face back home since Jamaica is obviously a majority black country. Like, yes, there's classism and colorism, and I definitely benefited from being like lighter skinned in a middle class environment, living in a gated community. But I feel like I was like somewhat insulated from the worst of it, especially like the violent homophobia that darker skinned, more visibly queer people would experience. But in my head, like I thought America would be this escape, this better place. And I didn't realize just how many intersectional issues existed in the States around that time. Like gay marriage, for example, wasn't even legal nationwide in America until 2015. Like it's wild to think about. Like comparatively, like America, yes, was more progressive in terms of like same sex activity than here in Jamaica. But the fact that, it wasn't legal to marry your same-sex partner in 2015 blows my mind. Anyway, for those few years between like 2012 and 2015 thereabout, like I don't think I was super politically engaged. Like I tune in occasionally, but I wasn't locked in. But then Trump got elected after Obama in 2016, and honestly, like that was like a big wake-up call for me. Like it kind of felt like a cultural smudging. Like the country was saying, okay, y'all had your black president. Now we're swinging the pendulum all the way back. Let's elect the most racist white supremacist you've ever seen. And if I'm being real, the moment I really started caring about politics in a deeper, more intentional way was in 2016. And I know this might sound dramatic, but when Beyonce dropped Lemonade, it changed my life. Like that visual album awakened something in me. It was like this spiritual, cultural, and political slap in the face in the best way. And I remember watching it and being struck by the references. Like she was pulling from Daughters of the Dust by Julie Dash, like a film I had never even heard of at that time. And there are all these nods to Black Southern identity and womanhood and lineage. And then I started learning about the Black feminist thinkers that influenced the work, like, Toni Morrison and Audre Lorde and Bell Hooks and Zora Neale Hurston, and even the poetry by Orson Shire, like that wove through the visuals. I was like, wait, why has nobody taught me any of this before? Like, of course, we read Beloved in college, but the courses were mostly focused on like Caribbean and West Indian literature, and any American literature we read would have been some book written by some dead white person, usually a man. And, around that time, it made me realize something about my education. Like, most of the books we read in school up until that point, especially about Black people, were about slavery. And honestly, that kind of bothered me always. Like, is this the only story we have to tell as Black people that we were captives, enslaved, oppressed? Is this the only story that we deserve to be told about us? Like, yes, that's a part of our history, but that can't be the only lens we're allowed to see ourselves through. Like, where were the stories about Black joy or Black art, Black weirdos, Black futures, and Black queerness? I remember feeling so frustrated, like, we're more than this trauma. Like, why the constant trauma porn? And I think that frustration helped fuel my curiosity. I started seeking out other stories on my own. Like, I started reading and spiraling in the best, nerdiest way possible. Like, I learned about Emmett Till, I learned about the Nickel Boys, Black Wall Street, and I started questioning why Hillary Clinton lost to Trump despite all the odds feeling like they were in her favor. I became obsessed with understanding the why behind everything happening at that time. And, you know, all of this coincided with me starting college. And around that time, I was starting to make music. And so even though I was like learning in class, I was doing most of my learning outside the classroom. Like most of my time was spent in the library just reading and doing my own independent study. And I wanted to figure out not just who I was politically, but who I was artistically, what I stood for, what kind of music I wanted to make. And I was always reading articles, essays, memoirs, trying to figure out not just where I fit in politically, but also what kind of artist I wanted to be. And even to this day, my Audible subscription has like over 200 books on like, race and gender and class and things that I believe really help inform my political understanding of the world. And then I stumbled on, that Nina Simone quote, the one, an artist's duty is to reflect the times in which we live. And that stuck with me. Like it became like a personal mantra. I knew like right then and there that whatever I created had to mean something. It had to say something. So for those like 3 years of college, like 2017, 2018, 2019, I was like deep in it, learning about blackness, politics, queerness, diaspora, everything. And then just as I was about to graduate in 2020, the world fucking exploded. Like the pandemic hit, George Floyd was murdered, the Black Lives Matter protests resurged on a massive scale. Everything felt like it was in overdrive. That was the moment that inspired my first mixtape, Counterculture. It felt like the 1960s were happening again in a new way. The protests, the civil unrest, the political consciousness. And I wanted my music to reflect that energy, that urgency. So Counterculture was definitely my social album, like my attempt at processing the collective moment. Then I followed that with my EP, Watercolor, which is more about the interpersonal in love, relationship, softness, healing. Because after all that rage and reckoning, I needed something gentler, intimacy, softness, the things we don't always get to explore as Black people outside of survival. And no, I'm actually working on another mixtape, Puerto, which feels like the most personal album yet. But in a way, it's also the most political because Queerdo has so much implications in just the title alone. Like being queer is inherently political, especially when you're queer, black, and from the Caribbean. It's not just about who you love, it's about your identity, your safety, your body, your right to exist loudly. And now that I'm working on Queerdo, which is definitely the most personal project so far, it has made me understand like being queer is just about more than who you're attracted to or who you love. It's about how the world treats you, how you exist, how safe you feel. It's about your identity, your body, your right to exist loudly. It's about freedom. And, there's a difference between identifying as queer and just identifying as gay because being queer isn't just about sexuality, it's about a rejection of the norm. It's a politicized stance. It questions the systems and binaries that try to define us. And it's about fluidity. It's about defiance. It's about self-determination. And, that's really where I am right now in my life, determining exactly who I am and what I stand for. So yeah, all of that whole journey from counterculture to queerdo, it's been political, whether I realize it or not at the time. And it made me realize that progress isn't linear and that being politically disengaged doesn't mean the politics stop happening. They just keep happening without you. And, I'm grateful for those experiences. I'm grateful for all those experiences that resulted in my political awareness, even when it comes to things like reconciling with Americans' violent history after romanticizing the country for so long, for example. Like, of course, I was aware of like Native Americans being slaughtered by Christopher Columbus and his cronies, much like they massacred our indigenous population, like the Tainos and Arawaks when they visited the Caribbean. But I didn't really understand that what's past is prologue. So it was quite surprising to see that what happened in the past is what continues to happen with marginalized people in that country. And unless we do something about it, it's going to keep happening in the future. But yeah, I'm just grateful for my schooling and my education. And I'm glad I learned that the personal is political and nobody's free until everyone is free. And I consider myself lucky to have been able to attend a university as opposed to some people who, weren't given that same opportunity to expand their mind or raise their consciousness because of their circumstances. So that's a privilege I don't take for granted. And it's interesting because even though I wasn't really politically informed for the longest time, I think I knew more about American politics than I knew about Jamaican politics, which is interesting because I wasn't an American, so why was that? But then again, America did kind of have this like cultural dominance over us, so it's just like when we turn on the TV, we're seeing American pop culture. When we listen to the radio, we're hearing American music. So we're kind of like indoctrinated by it, I guess. There's like this cultural hegemony over us. And it's funny because it's not until I got older where I realized that there were so many overlaps. Like, for example, we both have a two-party system. Like in Jamaica, we've got the People's National Party and the Jamaican Labour Party. In America, it's Democrats and Republicans. Same energy, same shade of messy. We both have that tribalism mentality going on. It's PNP versus JLP, Democrats versus Republicans, orange versus green, or red versus blue. Like people pledge allegiance like it's Gryffindor versus Slytherin, and nobody wants to admit that their party might be trash sometimes. And I don't know, I guess where it gets different is like the scale and the structure. Like America system has like state governments and electoral colleges and primaries and Senate hearings and enough red tape to wrap a Christmas tree. Well, Jamaica, because we're like much, much, much smaller, our politics is more centralized. And honestly, corruption is like not even a plot twist, it's a main character. And, you know, America is equally as like corrupt. And, American politics is heavily influenced by lobbyists and billionaires, and Jamaican, it's like contractors and dons. So more of the same. But yeah, like while US and Jamaican politics might look different on the outside, underneath all the flags and finger pointing, they're really just two sides of the same coin. And like both countries have a two-house system. In America, it's Congress, made up of the House of Representatives and the Senate. In Jamaica, it's Parliament, also with a House of Representatives and a Senate. In the US, senators are elected by the people. In Jamaica, they're appointed. Like America has a president, head of state, head of government, head of everything. And we've got a prime minister, like the CEO of the country, calling the shots. Although we also have a governor general who's basically a ceremonial figure representing the British monarch. Like, honestly, I didn't even know why we had one since we gained independence in 1962. And it kind of felt like the governor general didn't really do much day to day, as far as I knew, because besides being there for all like the ribbon cuttings and speeches and reminding us we're still kind of like sort of under the queen or king, whatever, same throne. It's like he doesn't even go here. What's his point? What's his purpose? I don't know. Like, I guess he does help with like appointing ministers and deciding election dates, I guess. Like, whatever. But yeah, anyway, the US has a whole federal system, like states making their own rules, elections every 5 minutes, and politicians who campaign like they're running for prom king. Jamaica is more centralized, like there's less electoral chaos, but trust. Our elections come with a lot of horn blowing, a lot of motorcades, and the occasional street fight over orange versus green. And even though America's debates are all big words and fake smiles, Jamaican debates are straight up clashes. Like a man will call you dirty boy on live TV and still make it to cabinet next week. So, like I said, more or less the same, which is why I can understand why so many young people are indifferent to politics, even though they affect us directly. And it really makes me curious, like, why do so many 20 somethings feel apathetic about politics? Like, theoretically, we all understand why it's important to exercise our constitutional rights and show these old farts that we're socially conscious and politically engaged and educated enough to make informed decisions about our future. But still, the turnout rates at the ballot box and polling stations indicate that a lot of young people just prefer to opt out of the political process. And is it apathy or is it some other reason? Like, is it that we don't feel represented by these older decision makers, for example? Or is it that we'd like to be involved, but we feel disadvantaged by certain institutional and systemic barriers? Because if I'm being honest, I don't think it's true apathy. I think a lot of us care. We just feel overwhelmed. Like, there's so much noise, so much misinformation, and the system feels rigged. It's like trying to fix a leaky pipe with glitter glue. And there's also that feeling of, my one vote or opinion won't change anything. So what's the point? And so I can understand why it's hard to feel empowered when the system feels so huge and broken. And a lot of us are like checked out because we don't trust the system. And we definitely don't trust most politicians for a host of different reasons. Like whether it's like, stealing money or, sex scandals. It's like, why would we look up to these people who seem to be morally bankrupt, you know? And another thing is that a lot of us were born into chaos, so it's hard not to feel disillusioned. Like, it kind of reminds me of that Madison Montgomery monologue from American Horror Story Coven, where she talks about how millennials that were born between the birth of AIDS and 9/11 have one defining trait, which is a numbness to the world and indifference to suffering. And we've experienced a lot. We being millennials, outside of those two tragedies, AIDS and 9/11, we've experienced recessions, we've experienced the pandemic. We're currently experiencing a climate collapse, a new scandal every 3 to 5 business days. It's exhausting. We're tired, we're broke, and we've been gaslit by every major institution. And let's be honest, like a lot of us are checked out because it just feels like no matter who wins, we still lose. Rent's still high, wages still low, earth's still hot. Like, we want to care. But the way these people campaign with promises and then ghost us, it's like a toxic situationship, you know what I mean? It just doesn't make sense. And I can understand why a lot of us don't want to show up. And it also doesn't help that political language kind of feels like gatekeeping. Like, if you don't know what a filibuster is, for example, you're made out to feel like you're somehow not qualified to care about your own future. Like, political conversations often feel like they're reserved for the elite, the educated, or the Twitter thread philosophers with 60-part explainers. And so a lot of us feel like we're not smart enough to talk about politics because the language is full of jargon that feels gatekeepy and academic. It's hard to speak up when you don't know the difference between a bill and a resolution, or when phrases like fiscal policy and gerrymandering so like spells from Harry Potter, Sometimes it feels like if you can't quote legislation or debate policy on cue, your opinions don't count, which is so not true. The truth is, you don't need a degree in political science to care about justice, fairness, or how your life is impacted by government decisions. But this doesn't stop a lot of us from checking out. But, and this is a big but, ah, we can't afford to check out because the people making decisions are betting on us to not pay attention. And if there's one thing they fear more than a protest, it's a bunch of well informed, passionate 20 somethings showing up at the ballot box and the budget meetings. And that's why we need to understand politics more, I think. That's why it's important to not disengage because if we don't show up, the worst people will. And then they get to shape the world we have to live in, and we don't want that. But can we talk about how political discourse has become entertainment? Like, half of Congress, for example, is just people trying to go viral on C-SPAN. In a way, it's like politics is performance. Like, look at who the fucking president of the United States is. A reality TV star who's been elected twice, which is crazy to me. Like, I can't believe after everything that we witnessed from 2016 to 2020, we decided, well, not we, but a huge majority of the American public decided we're ready for round two of this. I cannot imagine 4 more years of that nonsense. But it's not just him. Like politicians in general are given main character energy instead of actual leadership. Like they're out here clapping back on Twitter and doing press tours like they're on a reality show. It's very surreal. It's like the Truman Show. And it's no wonder we don't take politics seriously. It's like a circus. Politics today is part reality TV, part Greek tragedy, and part clown car on fire. It's like House of Cards meets Love and Hip Hop. Like you've got the alliances, the betrayals, and the emotional breakdowns on live TV. And just like any good reality TV show, people pick their favorites. They stand them like pop stars and defend them and their drama like it's somehow nothing ever gets done. Like we tune in for the debates like it's a versus battle. We know the catchphrases, make America great again or each blonde, bad built, butch body bitch. Like it's given brand, it's given tagline, it's given PR campaign, not policy. But here's the thing. Just because politics feels like entertainment doesn't mean it should be, you know? Just because it's entertaining doesn't mean it's harmless. These are real decisions affecting real lives. These are real people's lives, real communities being affected. It's cute until someone loses healthcare, housing, human rights, or hello, a whole island gets neglected during a natural disaster. So, yes, find joy, find levity, laugh. But while we laugh, we gotta stay sharp too, because if not, it's only a matter of time before we start to internalize that unseriousness and start treating politics like vibes instead of real world consequences. And then we turn these big serious moments into memes and then we take them out of context and treat everything like it's a joke. And that's it's funny. And it's not just that, but like misinformation and fake news is everywhere. 1 minute you're reading about climate policy, next thing you know, you're on a TikTok conspiracy rabbit hole about lizard people in parliament. Like the line between news and nonsense is blurry. And when you can't tell what's real, you stop engaging altogether. And that's not apathy, it's like information fatigue. But is it fair to say our generation is uninformed? Or are we just informed differently? Because we're definitely informed, just not in the way our parents were. In fact, it's fair to say we probably might be more informed than our parents because we have access to so much information all at once. Access to social media and technology and the news cycle. That's 24 hours, 7 days a week, 365 days a year. Like, instead of reading The Economist or watching a 3 minute TikTok by someone in a hoodie breaking down the housing crisis while eating Cheetos, like, yeah, somehow we managed to retain that information than we ever did in social studies class in school. But the issue is like not all of these TikToks and social media posts that we see online are fact checked. Misinformation is wild out there, and when institutions have failed us, it's hard to know who to trust. And it's like, who do you trust? Who can you trust in this economy? You know, like there's so many influencers who appear to be politically engaged. But sometimes I'm curious if our generation leans more toward performative activism or real change. Because I think it's a mix. A lot of us want to make real change, but we don't always know how beyond posting an infographic in our Insta stories. Like, there's a social currency to appearing woke online, even if you don't vote or organize in real life. It's like your political identity becomes part of your personal brand. Like, here's my selfie, my brunch pic, and also abolish ICE. But I think the intention is there. Like it's just a matter of turning that awareness into action that lasts beyond the trend cycle, or beyond just a hashtag. And consequently, I want to interrogate this idea that, young people are progressive by default because, well, historically, young people tended to lean more progressive than their conservative parents. I don't know if that's necessarily true today, at least not as much anymore, because, for example, I've noticed that there really are like two Gen Zs, and we're watching that generational split unfold in real time. Like Gen Z 1.0 graduated high school during the pandemic. They remember a world where flip phones and early Instagram existed, and they came of age during Trump's first term, and they were kind of shaped by progressive movements like Black Lives Matter and climate strikes. Meanwhile, Gen Z 2.0 hit adulthood post-COVID with TikTok and smartphones as the norm, and and a very different political climate. And they were more skeptical of institutions and more exposed to counterculture ideologies like MAGA and anti-mask rhetoric. And these aren't just age gaps, they're worldview gaps shaped by wildly different formative experiences. One Gen Z grew up rallying for justice in crowds, the other grew up watching it debated on For You pages. And even their activism looks different. In real life protests versus duets and digital discourse. And it's no wonder there's tension. They're speaking similar truths from different timelines. And I think that's interesting. But there's definitely a visible shift happening. And perhaps some of it is like a backlash to cancel culture or just them being tired of being told what to think. And for some, conservatism feels rebellious now, which is wild. Like for them, being anti woke is the new punk rock or something. And I think for some people, it's possible that it's less about actual values and more about feeling like they don't belong in these progressive spaces, some of which were like created via tumblr.com, which I grew up on. And that's where like the whole finding social justice warriors annoying thing happened. So like those seeds were kind of planted from then, like early 2010s. And we're seeing like the backlash of that, that mentality happen right now in the 2020s, which is interesting to witness because a lot of people thought that these perspectives were too rigid, too judgmental. And so now it becomes like more about identity than ideology. Like, I'm not one of those people, I think for myself, even if what they think is just parroting a different group, which is interesting. And so I'm curious how much of our political beliefs are generally ours versus curated identities we share online, you know? Because personally, I've definitely posted stuff to seem in the know, even though I've been in the know since the womb. I just came up, my mother's vagina, just knowing things. But yeah, like I posted stuff to seem in the know, but deep down I was still learning. And the truth is, sometimes we build a political persona before we fully fleshed out our beliefs. And it's kind of like putting on a uniform before you know what team you're on. And the pressure to have a take on every issue can push people to perform more than they process. Like, for example, let's talk about how political expression online is often reduced to branding. Like, you slap a cab in your bio, like all cops are bastards. You post a black square, and call it a day. And, social media gives the illusion of doing something, even if you're not actually changing anything in real life. Like, which is something I myself am guilty of, to be honest. Like, I'll post Free Palestine in my Instagram stories, but am I really on the front lines doing the work? Am I donating to GoFundMe's? Or is it just virtue signaling? Like, am I organizing community? Am I volunteering? Am I showing up consistently? And the truth is, that's hard. Like, those things take energy and time and money we don't have because we're broke, we're tired, and we're traumatized. And it's not to like excuse or absolve ourselves from like being responsible from it for anything, but it's a reality. It's a reality that we have to contend in. But it begs the question, like, what do we do if we can't do any of those things? Like, is it possible to be politically engaged without being involved in traditional politics? Because honestly, I think community work, mutual aid, even just staying informed and having tough conversations, all of those things count. You know, Voting is important, but it's not the only thing. And it's like, how do we get more young people to care without making it feel like homework? Of course, my first inclination would be to make it relatable and relevant. Like, for example, don't talk about climate legislation. Talk about why our favorite beach might disappear. Don't say economic inequality. Explain why we can't afford groceries and rent this week. Like, real life is political, even when we're trying not to think about it. So it's important to put those things in context for us so it's easier to digest and understand. And it makes it easier to care about politics. Should we care about politics? Because I do. because it affects everything, even the stuff you might not think is political. I obviously care. Otherwise, I wouldn't be doing this pod. But I also get tired and overwhelmed and confused. But I'd rather care and be confused than be indifferent and complicit, you know? Because it's funny, like growing up, my understanding of politics came mostly from media, like watching Scandal or How to Get Away with Murder or listening to grown-ups argue. But it wasn't until certain things happened, like the Black Lives Matter protests, for example, during the pandemic, or even Roe v. Wade being overturned recently, that I realized, oh, this affects me. And that realization kind of pull you in, whether you want it to or not. But do I think our generation will change the system? Honestly, yeah. But it's going to be messy. And it's going to be slow. And it might not look like traditional change, but I think we're already doing it in our own way, even if it might take a while to get to where we're going. So where do we go from here? Can our generation actually change things? Are we just too disillusioned? Because honestly, I still think there's hope. Like, yes, I feel dread, but somewhere beyond the despair, I also feel hope. Despite what I see happening, I still have hope. Because I feel like part of the reason why we all feel so defeated most of the time is because that's what they want. That's their plan to keep us feeling hopeless and docile. But I refuse to give up. Like hope is a dangerous thing for a woman like me to have, but I have it, god damn it. And I see a lot of millennials and even Gen Z constantly fighting for our rights and continues to give me hope. Like, even though we're all tired and angry and confused, we still care. Even if it's messy, even if it's imperfect, we show up in different ways, and I love to see it. Maybe we don't always go the traditional route, like voting every election or joining a campaign, but it's obvious that we care about our communities in our own unique way. We care about fairness, and sometimes that's where real change begins, you know? At the end of the day, caring about politics doesn't mean you have to be on CNN 24/7. It just means staying awake, paying attention, questioning things, and yeah, calling your political leaders and calling them out when necessary. So, whether you're a full-time activist or just politically curious, your voice matters, even if it shakes, even if it whispers, even if it only tweets once every 4 years. So, yeah, politics is messy, petty, and way too dramatic sometimes. It's frustrating. It's a soap opera with real world consequences. But it's ours, whether we like it or not. Whether we like it or not, politics decides what kind of world we want to live in. So maybe it's time we stop pretending we don't care and start making them care that we care. And to anyone that's listening, thinking, what can I do? Know this. You don't have to run for office. Unless you want to, Queen, go off. But start small. Read. Ask questions. Get involved. Hold people accountable. Vote. Organize. And most importantly, stay curious. Because whether you like it or not, politics is going to affect you. Maybe you can't fix the whole system overnight, but you can do your best to stay informed and call out nonsense when you see it. So go out there and support grassroots movements. Demand better. Even just talking about it like we're doing right now, that's political. Because politics is not just parliament and Congress, it's protest, it's community organizing, it's, you know, what you post, it's what you don't post, it's how you live. So, with that being said, that's what I have to say on politics on this episode of 20 somethings. I'm Tico. I might not have all the answers, but I've got opinions and a good mind. So if no one told you today, your voice matters, your vote matters, and you're not crazy. The system really is rigged, but we're learning how to unrig it. So yeah, stay woke, stay spicy, and remember, politics might feel like a joke, but the punchline is your future. Catch you next time. Bye.